So I don't know that the problem goes away. We may address the symptom. We may address the immediate sore, but eventually it comes back.
I think another point too that makes me reluctant like Roger is I don't think I can speculate again. I think more seniors are working longer. 55 and over, they're working longer and working full time. And by choice, for one reason or another. That may change in the future. But we balance it by saying, okay, if this development were in place, who is enticed to live in this particular development? Are they the type of person who would then be, employed full time? And, and
well, if I were to
that would
speculate,
be hard to speculate a little bit. It might be a convenience thing. I don't know.
I
tried to think through that.
I could speculate in just one opinion on it. When you look at a proposal like this, it's really divided into, as the applicant has put it, they want to create a community that allows for a transition. So when you first move in there, which presumably might mean that you're in that 55, 60 range, and you don't need any assistance, or not much assistance. You're not in the larger building with the smaller units because you have your mobility and you have a car, so you want a garage, and so to put that car in. Well, if you have a car, you're probably likely to drive it once in a while, and so if you maybe you're in that demographic that is a senior who's working, and so you are going to get that car out of the garage. But a significant number of the residents that make up the density of this proposal, perhaps they don't have a car. That's why they're in the other building. Maybe people come to visit them, and certainly workers come to the site. But the impact on traffic, I've got to believe, is lower for that segment of it. And even if the younger part of the senior demographic are driving, they're in a smaller number of units.
I guess also, if I can add to that, is the traffic manual takes all those things into account. Not everybody that lives in a single-family home is 3.5 people. It's a blend of the single household, single person living there. It's a blend of the single mom and 2 kids. It's a mom and dad and 4 or 5 kids. It's all of that blends together to get that national traffic production number. The same way with senior housing. Are there going to be some seniors in this project that are working still? Sure there are. Are there going to be seniors there that have no vehicles and never take a trip at all? Yes, there will be. But you take that type of project and you boil it down and you come up with the numbers that we demonstrated to you. That's what the difference is. Now, will this project have more working seniors than a typical project? I don't know.
That's what I say. It's hard to speculate.
I don't know. So we can't speculate that.
Nor do I know if we need to speculate. If it's baked into the numbers, if it's baked into the standards that are in the ITE manual, now I still got the strap marks on my back from going around and around with the traffic engineers on the ITE standards when I dug through that thing, which was brain damage. I don't know how they come up with those numbers. I know a lot more now than I did before, but I still don't know enough about how they come up with their standards. But I know enough to believe that they're standards for a reason.
And just to add a point, and we're not talking about the difference between 4 and 5, 4 and 6 trips per day. We're talking about the difference between 3.5 and 9.5 trips per day. So if this skews a little bit to one side or the other of that, I still don't think we've crossed the threshold over into this being a more traffic intense use.
Well, that's a great point. As I'm just going to go to a reference to what you're referring to on page 6 of Mr. Nix's memo. He has a chart which I imagine was culled from the data previously submitted, but it shows that when we talk about weekday trips, total per unit 9.57 for single family home, and attached senior housing 3.48. Now, it's attached senior housing. I don't know if that takes into account the ones in the larger unit that will be less likely to have vehicles, but even if it instead, you're 3.5, as Mr. Folkrop points out, 3.5 versus 9.5. There's room that if you're off by double, it's still.
Can I ask you a question, Brian? I didn't bring the traffic study, or, well, excuse me, I didn't bring some of the others. How many units would have been in the test plan, do you recall?
61?
61?
Yes, sir.
Now, that's a great question, Roger.
You know where I'm going.
Well, and I want to go there. I think that's maybe next or almost next on our discussion here is the, what the density of this proposal versus the density of what that parcel could hold developed in other ways. It is a significant impact. And we have that question of 7 point something versus, whatever it was, 4 or 5 or 3 to 5. But I do want to get there, but before we get there, I want to finish up on this traffic question. One of the residents, I don't remember if it was in comment or email, or maybe it was one of the various tomes we received from Mr. Cerner and Mr. Hine, the question of, we've got 2 entrances. At first, I thought we were talking about one, and the second one would be emergency-only vehicle. That has morphed into, the second is an emergency-only vehicle. It is a true entrance into this development, the one on Dutton. And I believe in response to a question asked from the commission, maybe it was last month, that Mr. Mosheri, and correct me if I'm wrong, you indicated kind of a 2/3, 1/3 utilization of these entrances. Is that right?
That's correct, and that's what's evident in the traffic study also. So that's never changed. There's very early in the introduction in June, it was thought that it may be for emergency ingress and egress only. But when we got to the August meeting, that was not the fact. Once we got to August, well, it might have stuck in your head from June to August, but in August it was very clear that it was going to be not just a secondary entrance, but ingress and egress, because
A serviceable
we didn't want to
entrance.
burden all the traffic in Adams. It would just make matters worse.
Well, and recognizing that with the open path to Lapeer on Dutton, that people may come out on Dutton, as you've experienced, and go that direction. But I want to explore a little bit that 2/3, 1/3, and how we come to that. Was that 2/3, 1/3, or was that?
Based on allocation of the units within the site plan.
Okay. That was part of the breaker-off analysis?
That's correct.
And that analysis, of course, was confirmed by peer review. Right?
Right.
So this idea of some of the traffic will go on Dutton and some of the traffic will go on Adams is something that was part of the formal traffic studies and the analysis of that to validate the impact on traffic. Okay.
Does it sound better if it's, 63% versus,
No, I don't know that that's.
what I'm getting at, they mathematically did it, and it colloquial, it sounds too easy. I understand the concern.
No, I just wondered what the foundation was behind the statement. And I'm more comfortable if it was one that was incorporated into the more rigid analysis of counts and factual data and standards that would be part of a traffic study. Other comments on that one? I think a lot of what our task is here before we could even contemplate making a recommendation, which, just by the way, I don't foresee happening this evening in case anybody's got that thought bouncing around their heads. It could, who knows where this thing goes. But one of the things is to consider, we have a proposal here that proposes a much greater density, a proposed use that has inherent within it a greater density. And that greater density ties directly back to the type of residence, the demographic of the residents, and the accommodation of the needs of those residents, seniors in particular, assisted living in part, or independent living in part. But in our master plan does address the need for senior housing, and does identify 3 areas in the township where, at whatever time that came about and was reviewed just recently and revalidated, that is one of the areas. And we can and perhaps should discuss the master plan and its what it says about senior housing and see if it fits here. Unfortunately, our ordinance 16, our township planning, our zoning ordinance that we use, doesn't address the senior housing type and the inherent nature of accommodating that demographic. So the result of that vagary, if you will, of our zoning ordinance is that any test plan used in comparison, any analysis of the density you would have by developing this parcel some other way than what is proposed is going to represent a significant skewing, if that's a word, of the numbers. The variance is going to be significant, no matter how you did it. So, in other words, we don't really have a way within our ordinances to do what our master plan calls out, which is to accommodate senior housing in this area or in the other 2 areas that are proposed. Because we don't get to that level of density that is being proposed by the applicant. And I know that the residents have, with understandable basis, kind of latched on and said, wait a minute, all this density, do we need that much density? So I'd like to explore that in terms of, we have a proposal here that the applicant suggests is consistent with our master plan. Some of the residents might disagree. But I have our master plan here, we can look at it and see what it says. Now, we have a report from Mr. Nix where he addresses the master plan question. But I want to throw it out here for the commissioners to discuss it, having all the input that we have and maybe getting additional input from Mr. Nix or anybody else. So I'll throw it out. This question of use of a parcel as a senior community and its impact on density versus developing in a different way. Any comments on that? You could even offer Roger a qualified with reservation, conservative, whatever it was you said.
I read the master plan, and I was part of the review and reaffirmation of it, and I'm generally satisfied that, yes, that language is in there. And I think we meant it to be in there. Now, your point about the zoning ordinance, maybe we should have contemplated that and done that work before, but we didn't.
Well, and to put some perspective around that, the master plan document that we have in place in the township that was originally adopted by the township on January 4, 2005, from what it says on the cover anyway, thereabouts. We have a zoning ordinance that it's unfair to say it's from 1974 because it's been modified many times since 1974. But the most recent attempt to update our zoning ordinance has been submitted by this planning commission to the township board, but I think it's coming back to us. And